Hello and welcome back to the show. Hope everybody's doing good. We started a bit early because these are die-off shows, so it takes a while. And so we're going to be talking about, at the beginning here, about radioactive shrimp from Walmart. We got a poll for everybody. Is Walmart cesium-137 shrimp radioactive because of Fukushima's meltdown's massive nuclear fallout? And so we're going to cover that for a little bit, but we're going to get into die-offs tonight. Again, this is day 3, and you want context of Fukushima, you're going to you'll get some tonight, but generally the first out of this series of videos, this is number 3rd, will break down all the Fukushima documentation for you and get you educated. And so James had put out a radioactive shrimp song that was just genius. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it should be in some kind of contest for the artwork that he got done. Is like absurd. It was absurd, and we're gonna play it for you, and I'll be back right after that.
Listen close to the tide tonight. The ocean serves what the core ignites. Shrimp, shrimp, camarón atómico. Shrimp, shrimp, camarón radioactive. Cesium 137B. You can't taste the chain reaction. Isotopes will not disguise. Every bite is a confession from the vessel where it lies. Not a rumor, not a maybe. This tracer cuts like steel. Proof of fission in the body. Half-life sealed in every meal. Rain bottle, Cesium 137. Rain
How good is that, really, though? There's so much detail going on there. You got to watch it a few times minimum. As a work of art, James. Holy shit. Man. That boy's skill is just... But I mean, that was over the top stuff. That was brilliant. Really, seriously. Now, that was art, is the best way to describe that. How else could you describe it? Hello, everybody. Here we go. So, Japan had a major event, right? Just go backwards for 1 second. Japan had a major event, and it was covered up. It was organized cover-up. The media participated and claimed that the buildings didn't melt down, that the buildings were intact, and that they were actually, in fact, on top of the buildings that actually don't even exist. And they've been out for their entire legacy reinforcing the propaganda. 80 years of the exact same propaganda, generation after generation, regurgitating the same propaganda. Like flying on an airplane, eating a banana, walking in the sunshine. When the reality of it is, it causes tumors everywhere in your body. This is a neptunium-239 radioactive fallout based on TEPCO's numbers, put into a model that's considered acceptable. And neptunium-239 decays to plutonium. Plutonium was named after the devil. And it gives you 3 tumors. Not counting all the other isotopes, you can't have just a plume of one. This model to your left is 20 days. So that's, and the numbers now, they're not including the numbers from these buildings. They're not including the 4 fuel pools. They're not including the inventories from it. It's all gone also. And they're not including the fact this was, number 3 reactor was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. That's number 4. These were 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings that actually don't exist. So this should concern you because it does. You can pretend it doesn't affect you, but you're delusional. You're not being realistic. This is your problem, and my problem, everybody else's problem, your loved one's problem, everybody's problem. Like the fuel pools reactors were at the top of the buildings, and they matter. Each of them is equal to 100 Chernobyl, and Chernobyl mattered. They closed 9,400 firms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. And Chernobyl had never had none of these attributes. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, was a new reactor, was a small reactor, didn't have decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings that are gone too. And they're just as volatile as a running reactor. The reactor doesn't need to be running, the material just needs to go through a chain reaction. And it can melt down 1,000 years from now. The German model of 2013 is the entire Pacific, but the models covering the planet showed all the fresh water, salt water was contaminated by 20 days. And then these are studies based on actual releases, but that was downplayed. They weren't the real numbers, right? We launched emergency research expeditions for 6 years due to the massive radioactive fallout, covering the planet from buildings that were lost their entire inventories. The tanks, the 1,000 tanks, we can only find 750, but the 1,000 tanks are built, if they do exist, were built to trick you, manipulate you, and deceive you, and coerce you into being complacent. There is no filtration system. In 2013, February, they were building, that's the filtration, the so-called ELP system, but you can't filter water from a nuclear meltdown. So you're pouring water over a nuclear meltdown, and then allegedly you're sucking that up and putting it through a filtration system. Are you delusional? You can't get near the meltdown just to recover the water anyway, in the first place. And you have wells drilled around the site. So water that's running into the ocean, they're taking samples out of those wells. They're just holes in the ground they drilled, and they have a pump down there. And any water that pulls up, they'll pump it up, and they're supposed to be put into a specimen container so they can measure the radioactivity. But because people are incapable of comprehending the basic nuclear stuff, they flipped the story and said that they were recovering the water and putting it in 1,000 tanks, which is absurd because each reactor in a normal operation would fill up all those tanks 6 times a day, to 1,000 tanks. This is the ALPS system of a picture that they handed out, ALPS decontamination system under construction. But in 2014, the end of it, in August, they said they were hoping to have ALPS by the end of the year, which puts them into 2015. Now we know because we followed this. Now, the filtration system can't work because you're having multiple sieverts per liter. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose in proximity for a human. Your organs melt. And there's no suits, anything that can protect you. So you mean to tell me you're going to take, when you put 1,000 liters through the filter, you got 1,000 sieverts plus 2,000 sieverts, because the sieverts that you're talking about is only beta. They're not acknowledging alphas and gammas and neutrons. And because science doesn't work that way, you have to include them. So but let's say there's only beta, which is a delusional conception of the reality. You still at 1,000 sieverts. So how are you going to change the filter at 1,000 sieverts when 3 sieverts will melt your organs? What do you think 1,000 is going to do? It's like a sniper round from 100 feet away. It's beyond a lethal dose approaching it. And not only that, the water that's going through the filter at this point, so you're only talking 1 ton of water, 1,000 liters, right? So now when the water is going through the filter, when it comes out the other side, instead of being 1 or 2 sieverts that you're putting into the filtration system, when it comes out the other side, it has to squeeze through 1,000 sieverts to get out the other side, because that's how a filter works. Which means your tandem now is going to be 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 sieverts per liter. You can't filter it. You're talking about fuel particulates that are splitting atoms on top of that. And so if that gathers up in the filter, you're going to have a meltdown of criticality in the filter. You got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, and fuel particulates itself. You're going to have a meltdown. In the pipes, in the bottom of the tanks, wherever that stuff is too, is going to melt down. So the tanks weren't full, and not only that, you have so many earthquakes there. If you have an earthquake with 1,000 tanks, some of the tanks breaks their plastic hoses, which is the stupidest story imaginable. You can't get back on the site. The reality of it is, you put this stuff in the tanks, which is what they allegedly done before they had the filtration system, which didn't exist until way past 2015. But the REVA system, the French government's REVA system, was the exact same as the ALPS. They never turned it on because of the properties and the attributes I was talking about earlier, where you can never get around the pipes, the filtration ever again. It's an idiotic suggestion that you could, but it hoodwinked everybody on this planet. The tanks themselves, they're actually dismantling tanks. They said they have high-level water into them. It doesn't work that way. You can't get in there and dismantle it. The metal itself aggregates the radiation. You can't work on nuclear meltdowns. These are the original buildings. You can't work on that. And we went and done research expeditions. What we showed was the species on the west coast from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska are exterminated. The radioactive fallout wiped out the insects, and millions of migratory birds a couple of years back. It was 192 species of insect-eating migratory birds all showed up extremely emaciated. And every nuclear power plant they're building is surrounded by farms. And so the 2 that they're building in the United Kingdom are both Sizewell C and Hinkley Point, are both surrounded by farms. You can't contain the emissions from the fuel pool. So Fukushima, you got to go back and watch the first video of these 3. This is number 3, to get more insight into why I'm making those assertions. I'm providing a lot of documentation, but let's get back into the die-off, because we've been doing that for 2 days. This is day 3. And just to recap on this year, in April of this year, grey whale die off fear. The starving whales migrate. Starving whales. Their condition is they're poor condition. Now, poor condition in a whale is emaciation. They're starving to death. And to articulate that, they acknowledge last year they were in poor shape. They were emaciated last year in a 12,000-mile migration, which meant this year the whales we're seeing are extremely emaciated. They have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and vertebrae visible even from the shoreline. They're not going to be here in a year or two. Most of them are not even going to make it to 12,000 miles. And they had no surviving babies last year. There was 80 born this year. They're not going to be showing up at the northerly end of this particular migratory trip, right? They're done. And the mothers are likely too unhealthy to birth and feed healthy babies and create healthy babies, is what I should be saying. The babies are not healthy. And they had 80 or 60 last year that traveled south, and there was none survived the trip. And now there's only 13,000 out of 27,000 left. 14,000 have died post-Fukushima. Okay. The FDA warns the public not to consume potentially radioactive shrimp. And so I've been trying to figure out what the hell this story is actually all about. Cesium-137, as if that's the only isotope that exists for some reason. Well, for every cesium-137, there's 100 strontium-90s made after the first 1,000 days. The ratio is 100 to 1. Cesium is brutal, by the way. It pulses energy 600 feet every second. It's going to wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells every second in every direction. With a pulse of energy, you call it Becquerel. The Great Value brand of raw frozen shrimp, and I mean, that James Lewis's video that I played at the beginning, that's a work of art. I've never seen anything like that. That was brilliant. Like, that's next level stuff. He produces a lot of amazing music, but the visuals in that, and it is just like, wow, man, how are you going to top that, really? I'm pretty sure, like, what I think is going on with James is he's way more advanced in his thinking than AI is able to keep up with. It's getting there, right? It still hasn't got there. Remember, AI is not very old for the public access, right? It's just a year and a half or 2 years. Barely 2 years. I made 14,000 pictures because there's 150,000 sites with one-ton bags on it, 30 million one-ton bags total, that we know about, that they picked up in Japan. And we only had pictures for about 1,000, so there was 149,000 sites that we don't have pictures of. And so I was trying to replicate that. Along the way, we replicated, we try to create other stuff to tell the story. Great Value brand of raw frozen shrimp. And my phone blew up, everything blew up. All my comments blew up on this story. This was pumped out there, and I read 11 stories about it. There was a lot more out there. So what were they up to when he pushed this story out there? First, he wanted to reinforce cesium-137. That the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods is not cesium-137. So let me bring it up for you. This was a study by the United States Navy at Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico on curium isotopes. Curium isotopes sometimes, like everybody else, you got keywords for your search that you know you can bring up. You can find a file pretty quick. Here we go. And we might as well do this whole one anyway. This is important because we're talking about plutonium just a moment ago, right? And you'll hear the references in James's music of plutonium and curium quite regularly. And that's really important too. Keeps reinforcing it, right? Curium compounds in dogs, application to human exposure data. Curium isotopes are a major byproduct in radiated nuclear fuel. So forget about the alphas for a second. It's an alpha isotope. It needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium to shield you, by the way. I'm going to explain plutonium for you. Curium isotopes are the major byproduct. So not cesium, not iodine, not uranium, but curium isotopes, hence the name of a nuclear meltdown is a curium. But there's a caveat to it because they talk about application of human exposure data on dogs, but the animal's kidneys are 50 times less efficient. Human kidneys are 50 times less efficient than animals at removing plutonium from their body. So you're 50 times more vulnerable than the dog is. And in 144 dogs from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, which is the U.S. military, out of the 144 dogs, 93 dogs died of bone tumors, 46 died of lung tumors, and 20 dogs died of liver tumors, but they were competing tumors. So generally, if you live long enough, you'll have all three tumors that are fatal from a single isotope. And they suggested that the findings in the dogs suggest a similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans. Well, I had already known that human kidneys were 50 times less efficient than in animals at removing plutonium, so that's why you see me always poking that in there. But the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod is the curium, and they need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And you're 50 times more vulnerable than the animal is for plutonium, so your orders of magnitude is even worse again because of the curium isotopes. It's a super energetic isotope. So back to the shrimp and the Barbie story. It said the U.S. Customs Border Protections detected cesium-137 in shipping containers at 4 U.S. ports. So they were trying to blame, somebody had found cesium, a gamma anyway, some kind of gamma. They call it cesium. Somebody had found gamma and it got a bit of traction. And so the media had to come out and put that down because you didn't want that to blow up. So they needed to control that narrative. And that's what the radioactive shrimp narrative was all about. Yeah, there is some, but it was only found in one sample. That's right. So this was a cover-up. Somebody had found it, got traction, and the media came out and had to stomp it into the ground before you woke up, before you start taking a second look, before you start asking questions. And hopefully you never find someone like me, because then you might be upset. Containers that tested positive for the isotopes have been denied entry to the United States. Okay. So let me explain this another way. This is a way that you absolutely, you'll get for sure. You'll figure this when I show you. You'll be like, oh, okay. Why didn't you do that earlier, Dana? Well, because it's no fun that way. And I'm a bit of a dork sometimes. And so, blah, 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 United States, USA. Okay, let me explain this one to you. This is always so complicated. Why is life so complicated? There we go. So they found that in the shrimp, but they didn't find, well, I'm going to show you coming up here in a moment. That's the question you need to ask yourself. But they found the stuff in the shrimp, but they didn't find, they didn't close the schools in the United States after Fukushima like South Korea did. California was under radiation threat levels as high as Japan, but they didn't tell you that. Striking that the radioactive iodine 131 in California rainwater is so far above levels permitted in drinking water. But they like there was one media reported on it, but the major media, all the major media didn't come out and scream about Walmart shrimp like they did with Walmart shrimp, right? In San Francisco, it was 18,000% above the federal drinking water standards. And they use iodine because when you look it up, you say, well, it's gone in 8 days, but there's actually 10 half-lives, so it's 80 days. But even then, you're like, if you look it up a few months later, you say, it doesn't matter, it's already gone. And you'll be surprised how many millions and millions and millions of people fell for that one. They're counting on it. You can't have iodine 131 without all the other isotopes. Radioactive strontium found in Hawaii milk, they gave the cows and the goats boron and said everything is fine to the farmers. So the farmers kept poisoning everybody. And now heart problems, liver problems, and lung problems, and respiratory, pituitary, and thyroid, and adrenaline, et cetera, have exploded among the population. Fukushima radioactive plume contacted North America, California, with the greatest exposures in southern California. Do you really think that that went away? Do you think that turned to fairy dust? Do you think that's now inert? Do you think that's because you're on the other side of the ocean that can't hurt you? When it lands in your garden, its pulsing energy is 600 feet. It doesn't even need to get in your body. Fukushima plume to reach U.S. West Coast in months. No, 20 days I showed you earlier. Let me see. Berkeley, of course, UC Berkeley, said there's no way any release from Japan will be detectable. It was actually very high concentrations of hot particles of plutonium and americium. Hot particles. United States had huge radioactive fallout, and Canada. Documented from many different sources. Bear with me. And so the whole planet, I'm just going to show you a couple of them, then we get on top of the die-off stories. This study was the French government of cesium-137, covering the planet in 23 days at 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137. Per cubic meter of air, 1 million to 10 million atoms. So if you don't find cesium in everything, you're not looking, you're not trying, or the battery's dead in your device. And so the idea of the shrimp was to pacify the population to think that the food source was safe. Right? That's what they're up to. Yeah, there was some in the shrimp, but we got that under control. It's not going to get in your country. Don't worry. How could it not get in your country? This is the French government. This was a spike. This was actual numbers. This was documentation. This is not a projection. So even if that was only cesium-137, which is impossible for it only to be a single isotope, when you see a plume covering the whole planet, it's the full metrics of isotopes: uranium, plutoniums, americiums, neptunium, strontium. The list is so long, so hard-aching, and so devastating to the birds and the insects, mammals and animals, and all the other species. And I mean, there's a number. This is social engineering, this story is about. And so the next story, I think it was this story here. This story here says that the acceptable limits is 1,200 becquerels. So don't worry about. Now, they said there is bioaccumulation. That's why they're going to block us. They said they were finding 68 atoms per kilogram. Like the bioaccumulations, just a single atom in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells until it eventually builds a tumor around it. At the same time, that becquerel is a pulse of energy from an atom, an anthropogenic man-made cesium-137. So it's pulsing energy in every direction. This is wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. Your body's going to attack that source for the rest of your life with white blood cells every second of your day, and try to repair the damage. You can't keep up with that and attack the source and ultimately build a tumor around it. So 68 becquerels is probably 68 tumors if you live long enough. So one of them will take over, so to speak. So when Fukushima happened, the United States raised theirs to 1,200 atoms per kilogram, and Europe raised theirs to 1,000 atoms per kilogram. And many other countries done the same thing right away. Japan raised theirs to 500. And this took a few weeks to organize. And then they came out and said that there was a limit on food from Fukushima at 500 atoms per kilogram. And the Americans were like, well, you know, ours is 1,200, so don't worry about Japan because Japan's pretty safe. And Japan said, well, America is twice as much as ours, so we're being we're lowballing the doses we're putting into the population by being conservative. And it simply wasn't true. The numbers pre-Fukushima for Japan was 0.1 becquerel per kilogram. They raised it to 500 atoms, not but 500 actual atoms per kilogram of just cesium, and they didn't look for anything else. And same as these stories. If you got cesium, well, what is there? There should be 100 times strontium there. 90. You can't have that without uranium, plutonium, americium, plutonium. So what were those numbers? And there's a ratio. You can't have one without the others. It can't just be cesium. So this is social engineering. So this was to reinforce, right? Because somebody had discovered numbers. They were going viral. They got shut down or whatever the case may be, but it got some traction. The media came out with the cover story of and he said it was only one sample. They got it before it got into the port, so everything is hunky-dory. You're protected. These people are literally insane creatures. And in Walmart, of course, which is a military-industrial complex, I read all the stories, and that's what's going on. There's more to it, right? They're utilizing it for many different applications. It's a public relation pun. It's social engineering. The story is all about social engineering people into thinking that they're on the ball, and the reality of it, how did you stop Fukushima? How does that actually work? Right, how could you stop Fukushima, see? This is 23 days of radioactive fallout from the French government of cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million times, not 68 becquerels, but 1 million to 10 million becquerels per cubic meter of air. There was 220 million atoms of iodine-129 per liter of radioactive fallout. That's around for 15 million years plus 10 half-lives, 150 million years. You can't just have 56 atoms of just 68 atoms of cesium only, even if they were being remotely honest. There's 40,000 atoms of iodine-139 in a single bed of kelp off Southern California. Right, it can't just be iodine-131, but these are incredible numbers, 5,500 miles away. And the comparisons with X-rays and CAT scans are meaningless. Inhaling particles increases the radiation exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. Once it's in your body, like originally it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, according to the U.S. government. And when it's in your body, the exposure, because it's pulsing energy wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells every second. Your body can't repair that. It's trying, but it can't keep up with it with white blood cells. It's attacking the source with white blood cells. Fukushima really happened. And think of this statement here. This was an ambassador, Murata, writes to the UN Secretary General. It's no exaggeration to say that the fate of Japan and the whole world, the entire planet, depends on a single building known as number 4 reactor. So if that reactor blows up like that, then the fate of the world is endangered. Guess what? It blew up. It lost its entire inventories. Do you get the enormity of that statement? 100 years after Fukushima nuclear plant rubble burned in major Japanese city. These are insane. They're grinding it up, taking it to other prefectures and burning it in the incinerators. You can't destroy radiation by burning it in the incinerator. We're getting to the die-offs coming up. Hang on. Doomsday-like radiation released a fire in the pool of Unit 4 would be a global catastrophe. Well, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 all lost their inventories, their fuel pools, their reactor cores in the fuel pools, and the reactor cores themselves. I mean, this is only 23 days from the French government of a spike. This is not an opinion, right? This is a spike. More than 50, this is 2023. More than 50 whales die after mass stranding in Scotland. Anybody remember that? Look at this whale. This is severe emaciation. Which is what we've been covering for 2 days straight, by the way, for every species. This is one of the biggest pilot whale mass strandings we've ever dealt with. Don't ask me why there's a beluga picture there. We're talking about the North Atlantic right whale. There's an unusual mortality event for it. But all the other whales are shown up emaciated. And so when you look at radiation, the damage that it does, ionizing radiation, all of these studies are based on ionizing radiation. But according to the experts, very little is known about the effects of ionizing radiation. Think about the harmful effects to your pets when you take them to the veterinarian clinics. Because the pet can't tell you how they're feeling, right? After that brutal x-ray. Remediation of contamination, groundwater, and soil. A review on ionizing radiation-based technology for the remediation of contaminated groundwater and soil. This is some sick stuff. This is some twisted stuff. And so they radiate your food. They kill all the good nutrition in your food and bugs that you don't want important to your country. But they're destroying the integrity of your food. It's better off to let you get more nutrition licking a stamp than you will after you ionize food. So suggesting that you can take dirty, which we have a lot of everywhere you look, dirty water, right? And they're trying to make normalize radiating the water, and therefore the water is now safe to put back into the environment. These are monsters. This is monstrous to suggest that you can utilize the technology that way. Using ionizing radiation to remove of oil and organic pollutants. Another study of that using ionized radiation. It's really good at killing stuff. That's the ultimate you take away from all those studies. This was Dr. Jacqueline Jens at MIT 5 days after Fukushima. I think it was the 15th. And she was brought in on a telephone for some reason. The university is full of nuclear experts. And she says there's very little known about the effects upon a human.
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost no data about how much radiation we can live with.
But the reality of it is we have endless documentation about how radiation affects every species. They've studied every creature, every plant, every insect on the bloody planet with man-made radiation. They studied everything. And we're talking about millions and millions of studies. Dead birds, seabirds with suspected avian influenza washes up on the Manx beaches. Suspected. That's a conjecture, it's opinion, it shouldn't be in the conversation. It's a hyperbole. You can't put that in there as a journalist because you're just throwing stuff at a wall looking for something to stick, right? It's not journalism. A further 67 seabirds are thought to die or dying from it. This is the cover story for the radioactive fallout. Has been found washed up. And now, bird flu is real. Like, it never jumped species for a million generations. Why would it jump now? Well, their immune system is compromised is one reason, because of the radiation, bioaccumulation. But I mean, you know, over the last couple of days, we showed you the documentation of where millions of species showed up emaciated. And there was never a mention of the word avian influenza. That's a recent one over the last few years. And they're trying to associate it with all kinds of species on land, which is completely, and we covered that when it was happening in 2022. We challenged each one of the stories they were using for an example. These were birds on the side of the road that probably got killed by a car, right? You know, these were animals on the side of the road that they're finding to sending it into the exact same laboratory. And people that didn't send it to that laboratory, the results were always starvation, by the way. Like communities that sent it to their own laboratories, it was never bird flu, it was always starvation. So guillemots were found on the shores and south and west islands of Man. And what year was this, 2023? It's not there? Hang on. It's not on that particular story. Yeah, it's probably 2023. Bird flu kills dozens of cats in Poland, see what I mean? Right, but they haven't been able, like, the evidence, if it was doing that, then what was going to stop it? How come there was no more stories like that all of a sudden, see? Why was it just those stories only? Because they went to the same laboratory. Bird flu had killed dozens of cats in Poland. The World Health Organization, the least trustworthy organization on the planet, is UN. Why would you trust UN? It's 195 militaries, for goodness sakes. Do you really need UN to tell you what to do in your country? Do you really think that's a good idea? Is to have this unelected, unappointed, enormously influential military-industrial complex. It's the first thing they'd done after the League of Nations, they changed their name to United Nations post-Nagasaki, Hiroshima, was they attacked North Korea. They used more munitions than the entire Second World War all combined on Japan, on that little tiny island, as North Korea, that little area of North Korea, which was occupied by Japan for 50 years. They left it when Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened. United Nations went there and tried to take it over, lost, and had to get out of there, what they call a police action. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. Police action, they called it. Because they got 195 militaries, they had to go out there and thump their weight around. And now they've been ostracized for 70 plus years. So over 120 years of being occupied, ostracized from everybody else on the planet. You can go anywhere you want to, get on a plane, go on vacation. They can't. Because you let the United Nations manipulate you. They have no sovereignty over Canada or any other country. The first report of a high number of infected cats over a wide area within a country, and the only one, the degenerate says, found to be positive for bird flu at their laboratories, their disgusting laboratories. 2 were outdoor cats, 18 were indoors, access to balconies, there's 5 indoor cats with no access. So how did the indoor cats that were indoor end up with the so-called avian influenza when they had no contact with the outside? And what it was is any cats that were taken to the veterinarian had to be tested for avian influenza at the United Nations laboratories. There's a big incentive because they can take over a country through a health emergency, right? And since last year, authorities in 10 countries reported bird flu outbreaks in mammals, including seals and sea lions in Peru and Chile. And we already challenged that. There was 3,400 sea lions in Peru. And and we showed that a few days ago. They were brutal emaciation. Instead of being 6, 7, 8, 900 pounds, they were 80 or 90. This wasn't bird flu. Bird flu kills right away, right? These had starved it over many months. They were emaciated. And so it's completely dishonest, like the rest of the stuff they ever do and touch. Study finds marine heat wave caused mass seabird die-off in the Pacific Northwest. Well, they can tailor a study for anything. They got 4.3 million studies a year here in North America, Canada, United States. 4.3 million. And they're all given to Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, which has 20,000 journals, by the way. And they'll take it and they'll put it on a paywall, and you can never see it. You paid for it. 4.3 million studies a year. Imagine each one of these studies is multiple academics. And you got to pay their house payments, their car payments through the study. Pay for their children's education to come out and try to rule you after. You got any idea how much money is sucked out of your country by these fake studies every year, by the way? 4.3 million. Will likely result in the death of hundreds of thousands of millions of marine birds. 46 million marine birds are missing here. We had the biggest migratory route on the entire planet. They've been missing for about 4 years. So they need an excuse to come up with why they didn't show up. And this is it. We know because we're doing the research. A fork-tailed storm petrel, the biggest colony of storm petrels, which you're looking at right there, is about 60 miles away from me at the Bacalou Islands. In 2019, 2020, 2021, I was out there in the dark because they're nocturnal. And there's 6.6 million, 3.3 million breeding pairs, 6.6 million. And so when they raise their fledglings, there's around 18 million will fly out of there. I couldn't find one. They're nocturnal, so I was down there in the middle of the night, out on the Atlantic Ocean by myself, with the spotlight going, radar. I was there perfect time to see them coming and going before the sun came up. The biggest colony on the planet is naked out there. They're wonderful birds. They eat microscopic animals, right? Seabirds, they're what you call skimmers. Seabirds in the Pacific Northwest, from cormorants to storm petrels and Cassini auklets, are at risk of a mass die-off from a warming ocean. No, you had 1.4 million Cassini auklets died, and that's the cover story, I guess. There was 1.4 million Cassini auklets died in 2015 and 16 up by Alaska and British Columbia. I was up there on research expeditions at that time. And there was a million common murres. Common murres, and what was unique about those two die-offs at the same time was the common murres feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, like little small animals. Whereas the storm petrels, or the Cassini auklets, same as storm petrels, are eating the copepods, the phytoplankton, the microscopic animals, the zooplankton there, right? And so you had two different spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated over the entire coastline and the breeding grounds, the nurseries, at the same time. And I was shown an extinction event from my research expeditions at the same time. And the reason we were doing multiple years, because we went up the first year the species were annihilated post-Fukushima. We went back for 5 more summers to see if the species recovered. 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home doing species counts. Between 2014 and 2019, there were 5 mass die-offs. During these events, the birds died of diseases of or starvation, which scientists linked to warming in the ocean, but that was caused by the pulse event from Japan. You had probably 36 reactors melt down in the fuel pools and the reactor cores. The entire inventory is gone. Like, they're not pretending they're on top of reactor 4 for something to do. They're doing it because they're covering up the extinction event. And look how skinny the backside of that whale is. Just it's unbelievable. And it's deflated on top of it. Mystery of humpback whale that was found dead in the Amazon jungle. Nobody knows how it got there. That was a crazy story, remember that? Could have died from eating plastic, but it didn't. And they say that over and over and over for years. And when they do the necropsy, it was never plastic. There's never been one that they confirmed. Well, the one that did die allegedly with plastic, a lot of plastic in his stomach. Remember the traction that story got? Holy shit, for like 2 weeks straight. That was their poster child, see? But what it is the animal is emaciated. It'll grab on anything at some point, right? It'll eat anything. Humpback whales don't usually travel to the north, but when they did find plastic in whales, it was never the actual cause of death. Yeah, they found it there, but that was always in there. There was no food in it, and his blubber was non-existent. It had no fat, no blubber. It died of starvation, and the pictures of them are clear emaciation. Humpback whales don't usually travel to the north. No, well, not only that, it doesn't usually end up in the middle of a jungle. It was just where it happened to show up was the story. It got thrown up during a big storm, but the reason I grabbed the story was because in the picture you can tell it was emaciated, and it was in an area we've never seen before. This is a trend. Discovery that basking sharks are warm bodies like finding cows have wings. Oh, cows? Of course cows. So it's eating microscopic animals. Look at it. Just cruising along. They're a beautiful animal. In British Columbia, the Fisheries and Oceans consider them a plague. And so they modified the front of their ships. They put a big guillotine blade on it. And they modified the horsepower of the ship. And so the idea was to get the ship up to 35 miles per hour and then shut the engines off so that the shark wouldn't get out of the way, and then cut it in two. Mortally wounded minimum, right? They done that for years because it was getting caught in the gill nets. It was disgusting what they done. 99% of fish and shark species are cold-blooded, like nuclear scientists and academics and journalists. They're cold-blooded. Thousands of penguins washed up on dead on Uruguay's coastline. And this story, that was Brazil. This story, hopefully we'll get the date here. 2,000 dead penguins washed up on the coast of eastern Uruguay in the past 10 days. And the cause is a mystery, Dana. Bird flu was ruled out by the environmental authorities. Oh, the World Health Organization doesn't like that. And this is mortality in the water. 90% are young specimens that arrive without fat reserves and empty stomachs. Oh, you mean emaciated? So this is 3 days. This is nothing. We gathered up over since Fukushima, all that documentation. We can do these shows almost for a whole year. Every day, 5 days a week for a whole year of the die-offs. That's how much we've covered. They arrived without fat reserves and empty stomachs. What they meant to say was they were emaciated and they had no fat reserves and they had empty stomachs. Well, see, you can live a long time on an empty stomach. You use up your fat reserve, right? But there's a point though where you use up all your fat reserves, and even if you find a bit of food, you're still too weak to digest it. Your body's incapable of it. And she stressed that all samples taken have tested negative for avian influenza. You got to do that with this industry. And he found dead storm petrels, albatrosses, seagulls, sea turtles, sea lions. And we covered all that. I probably haven't got it in this particular pile.
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost
This is MIT University, day 5 after Fukushima.
no data about how much radiation we can live with in terms of elevated background levels.
So here's MIT saying they have no data whatsoever on what's a bad dose of radiation to live with. And their problem was they got a ridiculous amount of data on low-level radiation and ionizing radiation. And all of these studies that you'll see are ionizing radiation studies that has an adverse effect on some species. They've studied everything with ionized radiation. There's nothing. They even taken pencils and ionized and radiated and studied them. They studied every species multiple times, every plant, every insect, every animal, everything. Just the microscopic stuff. It's absurd. The biological process of aging and the impact of ionizing radiation. They study everything. And look how many, you see the names right there? Each of these studies are just a small herd of scumbags milking the system. There's 4.3 million studies every year produced like this. Not all on radiation, but the majority are. They've studied man-made anthropogenic radiation more than they have the natural elements from the solar system. What does that tell us? And they know everything about it. Look at this. When you look at all these studies, I'm not going to go through every one of them. This drive you nuts. But when you start to appreciate that, when they're saying very little is known, how do you account for this endless amount of documentation?
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost no data about how much radiation we can live with.
But they do. They have an endless, absurd, and a redundant amount of documentation. It's a prolific, unprecedented amount of documentation. Northern Norway suffers serious bird flu outbreak. So everybody was coming, all the major governments, the United Nations governments were coming on board with the bird flu narrative. They were sending it to UN and other government agencies to get it tested. There are cases of it spreading from several countries, especially in wild mammals like foxes, seals, mink, whales. And we challenged every one of them that came out, every single one of them without exception. The one thing about me is I'm very diligent in my documentation. I'm very methodical in making sure that if they leave room there, if they come out and, like they done with those sea lions in Peru, 3,400 sea lions. I mean, they were brutal emaciation. And then they're calling it the bird flu. Because you acclimate people, you're social engineering. People just, they don't question. They're afraid to question. They're incapable a lot of the times. That the largest outbreak they've ever seen in Norway, 3,000 dead birds were found in a town in northern Norway. It is reasonable to assume that there are several thousand dead birds, and this is the largest outbreak of bird flu Norway has ever seen. And then the story just goes away, and you never heard of another outbreak. When you got several thousand, then, and if it really is a contagion, then there's no expectations that it's not going to jump to many other species. If it jump one species, it's going to jump another species, right? That's the laws of physics. And because they're wild birds, you can't contain that. And they didn't all die, so it's a starvation event. That's the consensus there. Everything else is starving around them except for that lot died of bird flu, but all the other animals died of starvation. Get real. And when I was out there on the boat, we were seeing pictures of my thermometer on my 10-inch screen, right? Very hot ocean back then, too. Surface water temperatures increasing following a week of heat and humidity. But the ocean should regulate the temperature. The ocean is vast. The ocean is not like a lake. It's not like an in-body water, right? Or stagnant. The ocean is a big body of water that circulates. So there's no reason the surface of the ocean would stay, because we're talking about the open Atlantic Ocean, the open ocean, whereas normally it's considered the coldest ocean. It has the most oxygen because it's the coldest ocean. And it has typically, there's 100 Guinness Book of World Records for fog every year, but 126 days a year of fog. Following a week of heat and humidity is record high never seen before, like way beyond natural fluctuations, which is true, 100% true. We broke the cycle. If the water continues to be so warm, then at the end of the season we should be worried about potential storms, because the storm comes in on a hotter ocean is going to have more energy. And this is what we're seeing post-Fukushima. Things that as a storm comes this way, then it will have energy to pump from in the ocean. We are seeing that. That's why we're getting all the supercell cyclones, the supercell typhoons, the supercell hurricanes, there it goes, random windstorms and everything else. There have been mass strandings, especially during all the nuclear testing era. Absolutely, there's been mass stranding. We've all been poisoned worldwide. If you look at the laws that were trying to be enacted in the United States for entire states, that everybody in the state would be entitled to $50,000 to $150,000 because they were poisoned by nuclear weapons fallout, which is 100% appropriate. But then other governments didn't like that idea very much. More than 50 pilot whales have died after stranding on a remote beach in Australia West. Now, we covered some of that yesterday and the day before, right? And we were showing you in 2014, 2015, for instance, that the pilot whales were always autopsy, animal necropsies, and that they had empty stomachs. And the words bird flu was never ever mentioned until around 2020 or so. And then we started that show off yesterday with that picture, I think it was. They all got together, and we've never seen that before. They all got together into a group, and somebody had a drone and captured it on pictures. They gathered in a group and then they all beached at the one time. That was one of the strangest days. I remember distinctly how incredible that was. Watching the video of it, it was just unbelievable to see something like that. Bowhead whales may be pregnant for up to 23 months. I think they live over 200 years, don't they? Like a Greenland shark can live up to 600 years. If you don't believe our air, water, and land are being poisoned, you're truly delusional. Yeah, it's called Fukushima. Very little. Did you know very little is known about low-level ionizing radiation? I didn't know that. And I got thousands of these studies, and they know all kinds of things about low-level, but MIT doesn't. So it's forgivable, see? Mitigates testicle injuries induced by ionizing radiation. Well, if ionizing radiation causes testicle injuries in the environment, then that's why the species are not producing young babies. That's why the insects are disappearing, I wonder, because they're not able to reproduce. Yeah, but very little is known, Dana. And you can't keep up with it. They know everything. I don't think there's anything they don't know about low-level radiation, despite what MIT tells you.
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost no data about how much radiation we can live with in terms of elevated background levels. All of our data come about the health effects of radiation come from a situation in which all the doses delivered in less than a minute. And so we just don't know how much radiation can be, what kind of contamination level can be considered safe.
There's very little conscience in these people, is what she meant to say. I don't bother chasing mice around. Oh no. Caused by ionizing radiation. So she says there's very little known about ionizing radiation, but we got so many studies that make you sick just trying to look through them. They know everything. West Coast gray whale population still declining, 2023. But signs of recovery began to show. That's the furthest thing from the truth, wasn't it? North Pacific gray whale population down 46% in 7 years post-Fukushima. All of these stories are post-Fukushima. You never see these stories pre-Fukushima. They found the population has declined by more than 2,000 since 2022. What, in 1 year? That's the 2023? Yeah, 2023. So in less than 1 year, there was over 2,000 died. The primary suspect for the large decline during the past 7 years is the typical garbage can diagnosis, climate change. When the cops pull you over and ask you why you speed, just say climate change, see how that works. See if that works for you. It only works for the apologists. It doesn't work for you in real life. We know that the females are in poor body condition. Oh, you mean emaciated, starving to death. Severe emaciation, right? You can see the rib cage from the shoreline. I think that qualifies as... In the years that followed, about 600 whales washed ashore appearing to be malnourished. So they're actually acknowledging the 600 polar whales, or gray whales, are malnourished. They're not washing ashore because they're malnourished. They're washing ashore because there's severe emaciation. They can't keep their blowhole out of the water anymore. They're dying because they starved to death. Like the rest of them that are currently out there right now, they're starved to death. Back to that mass beaching in particular. Yeah, like they're in the shape of a heart. Look at that. Colette was right. I didn't notice that. But you can 100% see it. My goodness. That was some heartache, eh? And then he just ran up on the beach, but you can see their spinal column is incredibly thin. Which means to me they're emaciated. We're getting requests from around the world from scientists wanting the video footage of them all huddled together on Tuesday. I remember when I seen that morning, I woke up and seen this stuff, and there was a whole bunch of stories starting to show up. And then we finally had the video, and it was just, wow, man. I was heartbroken. And we covered all this. There's a numerous die-offs at the same time of the pilot whales. And what it is they're on the turnaround for the migratory route, same as the Cassini auklets. And there's no food, right? So they ran out of food. When they got to their migratory ground, there was no food there. And there's 2,000 miles, this is in Australia, there's 2,000 miles of reefs up there, and they're all bleached. So there was no food for them anywhere.
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost no data about how much radiation we can live with in terms of elevated background levels. All of our data come about the health effects of radiation come from a situation in which all the doses delivered in less than a minute. And so we just don't know how much radiation can be, what kind of contamination level can be considered safe.
She's something else, isn't she? Why did MIT bring her in on the shitty phone call? And what an insult, because they were all laughing when she answered the phone as if there was some magic joke there. There was nothing funny. You had 18,000 people died. Like, most of them weren't even rescued on that day. And they're laughing it up, having a big good old time. It was hilarious. There was a seated audience of scumbags, and they asked the most scumbaggish questions. And we actually done. If you go back to my videos, to the anniversary, to this year's anniversary, you can watch. I went out and audited MIT's video where we got that clip from, and I done it to Harvard University, and I done it up there to Stanford University in the corner. There are three really important ones, because these are the shakers and movers. They got all the nuclear engineers and nuclear academics, nuclear physicists and scientists. And so they rolled out their experts, expert lawyers, and the audiences were the same thing. And then the audience members that were asking questions were always PhD students, trying to get their PhD, rather. And they asked the opposite of the questions you should ask. So you see, the universities come out and cut your throat for the nuclear industry, and cut the throat of 8 million species for the nuclear industry. And they didn't blink an eye. Zero conscience about doing it to them. Such a dishonest thing, right? It's such. And how can you ever trust the university and the medias again? La 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 da da da. And I put a link into James's song, man. That is incredible footage. Holy shit. It's crazy that somebody can dream that stuff up and make it happen. Advances in nanomaterial-based laser desorption, ionization, mass spectrometry for blah, blah, blah. Like, they've studied everything. There's nothing they haven't studied with anthropogenic man-made radiation. They know everything about it. So when MIT is telling you very little is known and everything is based on a single 1 minute exposure to a healthy 25-year-old male, you are dealing with the worst human imaginable. That is the worst human. That's a serial killer in every sense of the word, what they done. The highs and lows of ionizing radiation and its effect on protein. They studied everything. They know everything about it. There's nothing they don't know about ionizing radiation. But when there's an accident, they'll roll out the worst humans God ever created. Controversy surrounds Fukushima water plant. Somebody sent me a picture of a painting they done of a whale, and with Fukushima and the date there and stuff like this. And it was an abstract painting. just really, it's really, really cool. Sometimes it's stuff like that that'll actually get out there. I'm not going to get out there. I'm censored. They got me boxed in. They got what they call kettled on the internet, on YouTube. I'm allowed no more than 200 views a day. That's it. Doesn't matter how cute and charming I am. I'm only allowed 200 views a day. That's it. Nothing more. And I'm not allowed no more than 40 thumbs up. That's a crime to get more than 40 thumbs up. I'm definitely hated, feared, and scorned. Controversy surrounds Fukushima water releases. Where have all the insects gone? Big ones, tall ones, green. Yeah, that's a great question. We asked that question. There was 20,000 insects missing from the tidal zones when we were doing the research expeditions from Vancouver to British Columbia to Alaska for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. The first couple of years I was out there 5, 6, 7 months. I was out there multiple times, come ashore and head back out again. It was madness. Where have all the insects gone? Yeah, we don't know. Something to do with the radioactive fall who's sterilizing them. An estimated 5.5 million species. In fact, insects account for 80% of the animal life on Earth. Not anymore. Habitat loss, pollution, and climate change. Well, pollution, anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout is right. That's the winner. Habitat loss, not so much. Like if you look at Canada's landmass that's uninhabited, it's absurd. If you look at British Columbia and Alaska, you get in a big jet at 30,000 feet and fly for a few hours. It's just endless forest and mountains and rivers and estuaries and streams. You can't blame pesticides. You can't blame street lights, which they've been trying to do. You can't blame climate change either, which is caused by 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry. That's climate change. Climate change is real, and there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger or with replicating cells that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. And we've covered the planet in radioactive fallout. It's the only emission we got that makes plumes that covers the entire planet is man-made nuclear radioactive fallout. And you have 1,000 fuel pools worldwide hemorrhaging radiation into the environment all day, every day. So you got 1,000 fuel pools. Each fuel pool is full of multiple reactor cores that are still splitting atoms with no containment. So instead of boiling water for millions of homes and businesses every day, it's just splitting those atoms with no containment. They're released directly into the environment. Each atom is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. And wherever it ends up, it doesn't get along with anything in nature. There's nothing in nature has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, so your body and the species attack it in their own unique ways. The insects are just so important. So 100,000 different animal species play a role in pollinating 250,000 kinds of flowering plants on Earth, with insects like bees, wasps, moths, butterflies, flies, beetles, etc., etc., etc. There's this whole ecosystem that we take for granted, and now they're not there. So the foliage and the litter is not getting broken down in the forest. The radiation kills off the bacteria and the fungus, so the plants are not able to function anymore. And you don't soak up water because you don't have that biota, because you need the bacteria and the fungus for the biota. The biota will break down the foliage and the litter when it lands on the ground, right? The microscopic animals and everything. And you need moisture for all that to work. And everything is out there is like a powder. And so the earth is not able to soak up water. So when you have rains, you're going to get flash floods. When you get lightning strikes, you're going to have massive forest fires because everything is tender dry. Everything is heated up because you don't have moisture in the earth. And then that's where the insects need to live. There's no habitat for them. And they all need fungus and bacteria, by the way. Bronze whale traps in shallow water dies and carcasses washes ashore. Look at emaciated. I'm not laughing. I'm just laughing at, well, I am laughing. That's the gallows laugh. And a bronze whale is not necessarily like a really, it's a pretty streamlined whale, but it's not skinny and emaciated like this. I don't know if I get a hit shot. No. If you get the head shot's important because you'll see the peanut head. And they're guaranteed they got a picture of the head. They just don't publish it. The editor's like, well, United Nations says we shouldn't publish that. This could be the first record of a stranding on their coastline. Is India? I'm not sure. Yeah, India. Fishery Survey of India. The only stranding we've ever had there is a severe emaciated bronze whale, of all things. It weighed 5 tons, 32 feet. It should probably weigh 5 times that. Did I look it up? Yeah, 12 to 25 metric tons. Let me see this again. So 12 to 25 metric tons. And that made maybe 5 tons, so severe emaciation. Pelicans are disappearing from the Great Salt Lakes 2023. Well, the lakes are drying up. There's no habitat there because of Fukushima effect, right? We average around 10,000, 12,000 breeding adults. That number dropped drastically this year. There was 2,500 to 3,500 birds. And since that time, all of them have died or been predated on by eagles or whatever, right? No, they all died. They couldn't defend themselves. They couldn't get out of their way. They couldn't fly away. They were finished off because they weren't going to survive anyway. His team didn't see a single pelican, and there was a lot of dead chicks and eggs. So the standard is when they abandon their eggs and their chicks, we see that with the seals and sea lions. We see that with particularly birds. It's because there's no food, and that's a survival instinct. Oh, none of the birds we tested were positive for avian influenza. I just despise it every time I see that word. They have to do it because that's the United Nations. 3 dead mink, you're not allowed to do anything. And the United Nations covers almost every facet of your life. They have an organization. Yeah, I'm sorry, an agency. 3 dead mink whales found along the Maine coast since the end of July. Like pre-Fukushima, the odds of finding 2 whales in the same beach was impossible. Now it's like, there's one, where's the rest of them? Determined it died due to getting stranded while searching for food. How would you determine that? That a giant whale got stranded because it was looking for food? Why would you say that? Because you don't want to say the words that, like it was emaciated or something, right? Stranded while searching for food. That's quite the statement. Like, that's some connotation. Well, they weren't thin, but they weren't fat either, Dana. Like recently, over the last number of years, we've seen them. They never starved to death, right? Like, they never starved to death. I know you're out there, Durnford. Determined it died due to getting stranded. I'm not going to waste my time covering nonsense. I'm not going to make stuff up either. I'm not going to misrepresent stuff on top of that. What's the point of it? What's to be gained from that one, right? No, I'm a bit cynical. Yeah. What do you expect? I've been at this forever. Everybody's out there, they're blatantly emaciated. Clear, like the spinal column is sticking up, the shoulder bones are sticking out, the big old peanut heads, and they're like, well, we're not sure what it died of. We think it was a little low on food, like you get low on gas in your car. It was a low on food, Dana. But I don't know how many times, just at least 5 times in the last 2 years, where it wasn't starving to death. Like, turns out, you read the next media on the same story, it was emaciated. They're just lowlifes. the worst kinds too. Post-Fukushima nuclear meltdown really opened your eyes into how insidiously corrupt and revolting your universities and medias actually are. Hopeful signs for declining population of grey whales along the west coast. Really? Hopeful signs. Really? And look, you can see the peanut head on this poor feller. Hopeful sign. Ho ho! The grey whale population on the west coast showed yet another year of decline. So what was the hopeful, I wonder? It went from 26,960 to 14,226. So that was 12,434 died post-Fukushima. Declared a population die-off as an unusual mortality event in 2019. Well, he should have declared it in 2014. Clearly. Researchers theorized the decline is partially related to changes to food sources in the Arctic. Yeah, it could be changes. After millions of generations, they only want pizza pops. I swear, honest, that's true. A nuclear scumbag told me that one time. Okay, it's not true. Yeah, the forest got no smell. Good call, Dana. Coastline got no smell. I'll never get used to that one. Used to smell it 10 miles away. Researchers theorized the decline is partially related to starvation. 3 dead whales all in a row. Found along the Washington shores last month showed signs of malnutrition. 237 counts per minute on the Geiger counter, just great. 185 would have been an evacuation zone in a nuclear plant pre-Fukushima. You know, we got a colony of birds like 6 kilometers away from me that is gone. Just got up and disappeared this year. They're there all year last year, 12 months a year. They were all there 12 months the year before. They're there all year long. Of the seagulls and kittiwakes. And they're generally feeding on sewage, which I know that sounds crazy, but the sewage bubbles up off the coast here. And there's nothing in the tidal zones whatsoever. There's nothing. Even if you flip the rocks over, there's nothing there. Well, if you get a full moon, you will get some sea urchins take up that prime real estate. They'll disappear. And I'm starting to notice a pattern. So there's a section, at the beginning of the year, there was 2 people showed up and put a tent out there, and they were studying the birds. I went there and watched them for a couple of different days. And they were putting bands on the birds, apparently. That's what I thought they were doing. And they had nets there. They're capturing some of the birds, and they were putting bands on them. And so there's a long causeway kind of that goes out there. It's like a sandbar, but it's up high enough. It has a bit of grass on it, stuff like that. And so there's the kittiwakes and seagulls. Now, just on the way out there, there's this bar of sand. And today and the other day when I was there was around 100 seagulls and crows right there. But the other 1,900 birds that were on the causeway itself are gone. There's no birds on the causeway. They're all gathered up in this one spot. It makes you wonder, was that spot poisoned or something? Were those people that were out there allegedly doing a study actually poisoning them or something? What happened? They didn't do it last year, the year before, the year before that, the year before that, et cetera. They've always been there, and now they're gone. So is the 46 million migratory birds that are supposed to come through here right now. They didn't show up again. Instead of the cliffs being full of excrements from raising their fledglings for millions of generations, there's none there. So normally that excrement was the stain, that white stain on the cliffs would be there all year long because they've been doing it for millions of generations. But they've been gone for about 4 or 5 generations now, 4 or 5 years. They haven't showed up to raise their fledglings, which was quite a spectacle, right? 46 million migratory birds. And right there on our cliffs, that's where they would raise them. 15,000 kittiwakes, they're like little small gulls. They look like it, died in the past 3 weeks. Now, what we've seen on because we studied some of the colonies of them out here, they didn't produce any eggs. And they have, where a cliff is like this, on like a 45-degree angle, and there's little outcroppings, I'm talking little, like this big. Right? And they'll get all kinds of weird stuff and they'll stick it there and they'll make a little nest. But if there's eggs there, you can count it. You can actually see it. It's compared to the other animals' nests, which got quite a bit of buildup, they didn't. So they had no eggs. It's the same thing with the puffins. I'm not sure if we're going to get to it tonight, but we'll certainly get to it tomorrow night. We got 1,300 pictures of the puffins from a colony down here. Didn't see any baby. Well, there was one baby. None of the puffins that came back had food in their beak, because they normally carry it in their beak and feed it to the fledglings, right? I've been doing it for millions of generations. But there was this one that stood out to me that came back, and you'll see it. You won't see it in the pictures. You might see it in the pictures. I do believe I got it, but I think it was too late, right? Because you'll see when I'm showing the pictures. Anyway, it goes in the nest. It comes back no food. Goes in the nest and brings out a baby by the wing, rather. And it wasn't very big. It was really tiny, but you could clearly see the whole shape of the boat wings and the body and the legs and the head and everything. And it just basically threw him away. And the bird, when it brought him out, the baby wasn't struggling or anything. Vitamin E protects glands, dysfunctions, ionizing radiation. Vitamin E, they recommend that after a nuclear accident, take vitamin E. Shelter in place and take vitamin E. Don't do that, of course. Run away. Didn't take vitamin E, but run away. Don't stay within 100 miles of a nuclear meltdown. Don't be a victim. Radiation-induced cardiac diseases, radiation-induced. So they got all these studies, but very, very little is known about radiation, Dana. Did you know that? Protects mice from ionizing radiation. The best way to protect them from ionized radiation is not to irradiate them. There's nothing on the planet with autoimmune trigger to defend against ionizing radiation. And skin cells, they studied everything. They know everything. They killed billions of rabbits and rats, and beagle dogs and beagle puppies. They're lunatics. The industry's a lunatic. It's a predator. It can only exist by consumption. It consumes everything, and eventually everybody. Population of Yukon River peregrine nosedives. And bioaccumulation, I would imagine. Alaska Science Forum, population of Yukon River. Oh, right. So, because they have the mountains, the huge mountain glaciers, and the glaciers are gone. And what happens is the glacier regulates the temperatures of the rivers and the estuaries and the streams all the way to the coastline. But their territory is up by the glaciers. And so if you don't regulate the temperature, the water heats up and kills all the frogs and the mosquitoes and everything else. The whole ecosystem perishes. And then the predatory birds don't have any prey. Right? And you'll see that all the rivers and estuaries and streams will dry out. They don't have the cold water running down to supplement it during droughts. And so they heat up to extraordinary temperatures because the earth is not soaking up water. The earth is heating up because it's not retaining the water. And I learned a bit more about water. You don't want to drink too much water. And so when you're eating, you don't want to drink too much either, because you're diluting the acid in your stomach so your food doesn't break down properly. But you didn't know that one. And And you don't need constant water. Your body's not designed for constant water. It needs electrolytes. So put some lemon juice in your water, but you still don't need water all the time. It's very unhealthy having it all the time. If you're thirsty, your body will tell you have something to sip on, right? But population Yukon River, peregrine falcons nosedive by more than a third in the last 3 years, up by Alaska. Normally they have 58 to 60 nests pair and 1 or 2 single adults along the upper Yukon. In 2023, we had 33 pairs and 11 single adults. They've been doing it for a long time. Oh, what a charmer. Hey, buddy. Yeah, he's pretty fancy. Well, they have found no dead birds to test for avian influenza. Disgusting, isn't it? It's social engineering, see? Do you think the disease prevalence all over the continent makes sense for a reason for the birds' decline? So therefore, let's get their picture. Get somebody up there and interview those guys. They said it was influenza. It's their best kind. Let's give them a new budget. And that's what they're doing, right? They're taking people, like the only protesters they showed, the only protesters they were showing in 2023 when Japan announced they were going to start dumping the water was people that were protesting tritium. When anybody protested tritium, they sent a reporter and a TV crew out there. They got all kinds of footage and they shared it with all the other media. You can use our footage to promote that narrative. They wanted more people. They wanted a lot more people protesting tritium. When you're protesting tritium, you're acknowledging that you know nothing about nuclear. You got a good heart and a good soul, but you know nothing about nuclear. Everything is tritiated now because of the nuclear industry, 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment, and the pulse event from Japan. Peregrines capture and eat birds, from wobblers to large ducks, and are quite susceptible to contracting bird flu, he said. Well, these people are not medical doctors. They're not scientists. They study the falcons, right? And so they're making those assertions without the background is unacceptable. You can put a complaint in to the institution where they got their degree, and their degree can be jeopardized from doing stuff like that, but nobody will, right? If I had the financial backing, if I had a foundation behind me and had a team, we would litigate people like that as an incentive for the rest of them not to use those assertions when it wasn't appropriate. Heffley Lake loons are in danger. Annual bird count finds. It's no big surprise that every species out there is on its heels trying to. Loons nest in the same location. They eat like a kilogram of fish a day or something. They're the most successful bird. As many years as possible, fighting other loons to protect their claims. Long-term nesting location combined with the fact that chicks are fed from a single lake during their rearing indicates whether a lake is healthy. That makes sense. If you don't put Fukushima into the equation, then you're dishonest. They deserve a voice, right? Those species all deserve a voice. Covert beak whales seen grieving dead calf for the first time. There was 1,000 of the covert beak whales that washed up in the United Kingdom in a 1-year period. So they estimated there was 10,000 died. And these whales were in different stages of decomposition, but the ones that were still alive when they washed up were typically emaciated. The sighting of a covert beak whale off the Spanish coast circling her dead calf, touching his head, lifting his body, adds to the growing evidence whales experience something similar to human grief. The killer whale's done the same thing. This is the first time such behavior has been documented in a beaked whale. Well, you never see those whales. It's very rare to see those whales. That was the exception to the rule. They're offshore deep divers, right? They're generally not in researchers' grasp for the most part. 3 dead whales in 4 days. Long Island, New York. 3 dead in New Jersey. And the tri-state beaches in the last 4 days, prompting scientists to study why it keeps happening. Everyone, I'm going to deny Fukushima. In fact, if you say Fukushima, they'll walk away from you. It's simply not acceptable to talk about the facts. Data shows New Jersey, everything is post-Fukushima. See, these die-offs, we've never seen these before. Everything is, all the major storms, major forest fires, major floods, all the major die-off of the species are all post-Fukushima. Have the highest number of humpback whale strandings and every other. It's reports from the NOAA showed this January until May of this year that there have been 6 unusual humpback whale deaths in New York and 7 in New Jersey. Well, excuse me. Since 2016, with more than 200 humpback whales washing ashore along the East Coast, well, which meant 2,000 died, right? If you found 200, then that's 10%. That's the consensus. That's what everybody agrees upon. Since 2016, with more than 200 humpback whales washing ashore along the East Coast. Researchers / crazies say climate change is a factor. 80 years of emissions from fuel pools worldwide is the factor, actually. That is climate change. Imagine an invisible snowstorm that covers the entire planet in 20 days. It never stops snowing and the snow never melts. That's radiation fallout. It never goes away. It never stops emitting. And each atom is pulsing energy up to the speed of light every second. Like cesium pulses at 600 feet every second for 300 years. Every fuel pool is hemorrhaging it into the environment. Every fuel pool is hemorrhaging plutonium and curium and uranium, americium and neptunium and strontium and 1,000 fission products. So the humpbacks are close. They're swimming closer to shore for the Mehegdons. You know, when we were up at the national park at the top of Vancouver Island, there was a humpback whale, and we showed those pictures and videos. We need to do it again. All day alongside of me, right? And they were in right under the boat over and over and over. I was ashore doing species counts, and they would come up right alongside of me. There was no room for them. That was desperation, eh? 68 whale deaths since 2022 raises questions over offshore wind power. How is wind power going to impact whales? Right? How does that work? It doesn't. Oh, it's Michael Schellenberger, the pros of pro-nuclear on the planet. Well, him and his butt buddy. Scumbags. He's very connected politically, eh? And so he's pro-nuclear. Like, it's hard for anybody to really appreciate how pro-nuclear this guy actually is. He wears a lot of pins, this guy. He wears a lot of hats. But he has a huge operation for the anti-nuclear. He goes to different countries and supports the pro-nuclear, or not anti-nuclear, but pro-nuclear. He goes to different countries to support pro-nuclear. If there's referendums or something like that, him and his team will show up there and fund the pro-nuclear. And I mean fund them too. He's made a fortune, that guy has. And he's disgusting. If you ever read his material, he's the banana peddling, bootlegging, cheerleading lapdog of them all. So, like, he knows the whales are dying from starvation. He's going to blame it on anything but nuclear, and that's why he's in the conversation. All the media will pump him out there too. Malnutrition, starvation, and ship strikes likely cause, that's quite the combination, malnutrition. So if you've got 13,000 grey whales, and you do, and they're migrating together, There's zero possibility some is healthy and some is not. They're either all emaciated, or they're all almost emaciated, or they're all healthy. But there's not going to be half and half. They're all in the same body of water, and they eat the same stuff as microscopic animals, right? So nobody can hog the food, so to speak. They've been doing it for millions of generations. Here we go, I got to do this again. Every once in a while, I get reminded of how inferior humans are when it comes to glasses. Look at all these cleaning these glasses, it'll never work. People have spent their lifetime trying to figure out the perfect way to clean glasses, only to wake up the next morning and they're dirtier than they've ever been before. Some people just pretend there's no dirt on their glasses. I have multiple screens going. Well, I have 3 screens going. I can barely handle one. Malnutrition is ship strike because you can't get out of the way because they're starving. A lack of feeding, also known as starving to death, emaciation, is not terribly unusual. It was pre-Fukushima. The 2 stranded ocean shores both display signs of emaciation. Well, emaciation and malnutrition are the same thing, except emaciation is the final countdown. You're on a very bad downhill ride when the word emaciation is. This is 3 days of stories of emaciated animals worldwide. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I'm off to the mechanic tomorrow. James Lewis donated $260. Bless your heart, James. And so I'm going to go to the mechanic. I got a bunch of work I got to get done. I got everything arranged. So now's the time to get it done. Go ahead and do it. I got all the parts, right? Just got to pay for the... I'm not going to get it all done in one day, though. I can tell you that much. I'm just not in the position. I'm not in the shape to do it myself. It don't matter. We got all the material. That's the most expensive part, right? And everything will be hunky-dory again. I got a lot to do, man. There's a lot. I'm going to do some of it myself, but not all of it. Like the hard stuff, I'm going to pay someone to do it tomorrow. I spend most of the year, most of my summers are on motorcycles. I have 2 motorcycles. And so I'll spend almost all my summer on motorcycles. No issues with it at all. You know, if you need to move the boats or something, right? Then obviously you got to use the truck, but I can get down on all the little tiny nooks and crannies and coastlines on the motorcycle. I can get footage and I can get documentation you can never get with the truck, right? It's the better machine. And it's easier to spot the insects on the bike. Both displayed signs of emaciation. 2 stranded, both of them. There's only 2 of them. Both of them were emaciated. What do you mean display signs of emaciation? How do you display signs of emaciation? Well, the rib cage is sticking out, their spinal column is defined. Extensive emaciation, Dana. Extensive emaciation. Well, normally you would say severe emaciation. That's the more appropriate word. Like extensive doesn't work. It's not a word you would normally associate with the word emaciation, unless you're talking about a group or something, right? There's extensive emaciation. Extensive parasites, which comes with emaciation, right? They have their immune system is kaputs. An unusual mortality event in 2019 when 216 whales washed ashore from Mexico to Canada. And it was starvation. That was emaciation too. And we covered almost all of them. Same thing with the birds. These were frozen into the ice. So very, very little is known about anthropogenic man-made radiation. Did I mention that? That's what MIT has taught us, right? Yeah, very, very little is known about anthropogenic man-made radiation. They're the experts. Jacqueline Yance, MIT scientist, ex-professor from the greatest institution in history, MIT.
Now, unfortunately, we have very little data, almost no data about how much radiation we can live with in terms of elevated background levels. All of our data come about the health effects of radiation come from a situation in which all the doses delivered in less than a minute. And so we just don't know how much radiation can be, what kind of contamination level can be considered safe.
It's MIT. How could they know? How can I have all these academic studies, but they can't find a single one? I don't know, Dana. That's just the way it is. The world's a funny place, Dana. Yes, indeed. The world's a very, very funny place. Da, 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 da. They've found so much radiation, but yet it's denied that it even existed, it even happened. They found cesium everywhere, but now they got it in shrimp, so don't worry, though, we're going to protect your country. Your whole country is loaded with cesium from Fukushima, it's loaded. And I showed you tons of that tonight, it's loaded. It's not maybe, it's not almost, it's not perhaps, it's loaded with every isotope. And so the idea is to convince you that it's not with a story like shrimp at Walmart. And everybody loves Walmart, so everybody's going to read the story. Fukushima radioactive plume contaminated the entire northern hemisphere. That's forever. That's forever, ever, ever, and ever, ever, ever. That's forever. That's like forever, man. And it wasn't just iodines, it wasn't just cesium, it was all the nasty stuff. The cover-up was extensive, and then the social engineering comes out with stories where they say they found it in shrimp. That's meant to disenfranchise people from the real reality of what has happened. And there's so much documentation of radioactive fallout, pretending that it never happened should be a crime, actually. It should be illegal to say it never happened. It should be a crime. And because this is real. The effects on humans and pets and animals and friends and families and the ecosystem and the species, this is a real issue. They have no right to downplay, and that's what that story on the shrimp was meant to do, was just completely disenfranchise you, right? Oh, and everybody, like, I even cracked the joke, right? Another shrimp on the Barbie. That's what they want. That's what they're praying that you do. Because imagine how much these emaciated whales, all the gray whales are emaciated. They were emaciated last year. They're dying now. Now they're dying everywhere. And they're going to try to blame on ship strikes and everything else to just keep you, not, people that come here, obviously, but to keep the rest of the population divided so you can't have a conversation. I couldn't have a conversation either if I don't bring you all the documentation, because the trolls would be here torturing us. When all the gray whales were emaciated last year, all of them, and all of them are emaciated this year, you only got a couple of years of denial left. That's it. The denial only works for another year or two. Then it don't work no more. So we done pretty good. We missed Sunday because of smoke. We got smoked out of here. But I've been kicking ass on Monday, Tuesday, now Wednesday. I'm always a little bit taken back by how much material I have. It's over the top, right? Let me bring this. So this is going to go on easily into all the way next week. And we have, I think it's 3,500 pictures or 2,800 pictures. And we have another 14,000 pictures that we haven't got to from last year that we desperately need to do. We covered over 1,000 ponds. There wasn't a single fish jumping in 1,000 ponds, and there wasn't. And we're in the Atlantic in this beautiful paradise, and the coldest, the most oxygen-rich area of the east coast of Canada. 46 million migratory species missing, birds missing. Yeah. Yeah, so the truck goes into the mechanics tomorrow morning. Hopefully, he's a pretty reasonable guy, so. We got to do 2 front wheel bearings. Got to do the whole front suspension. I got all the parts. It's time to replace everything. We got everything. Got to do the rear drums and brakes, which are calipers, right? Excuse me. And another part out there. I can't even think now. Not going to get all that done tomorrow. Tomorrow is just some tie rod ends and ball joints, A-frame. I got a new one. And the back drums and brakes. We're in good shape at that point, and slowly get the rest of it done. Outer Bank Vacation Spot's 900-pound pygmy sperm whale. And you can look at that, you can just, like, that's unbelievable emaciation you're looking at. Washed up on the beach. Oh, heavy seas, they say. It looks severely emaciated. Yep, that's about right. This was a Belgian whale. Peanut head, shoulder blades taken up, rib cage is highly visible. It's stunning, really, right? Stunning emaciation of all species. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. It's so hard to comprehend. But how much longer can the world live in denial about Fukushima? Because the whales are all emaciated, the seals are all emaciated, the sea lions are all emaciated, the birds are all emaciated, the insects are almost gone. How much longer can we live in denial, right? Oh, it might have been right there. Just bear with me, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for that story in the Belgium killer whale. I want you to see those pictures. I think that's it there. Yeah, that's probably it there. There's that Christchurch. That's Christchurch. That one's severely emaciated too, up in New Zealand. I was wondering where I put that one, so I knows where that one's too. There we go. Here we go. I got more pictures, but this will do. I didn't get a load of this. This was in Belgium. No. Oh, that's also Christchurch. This is New Zealand. See the rib cage? You can actually see the rib cage. Severe emaciation, eh? They admit it too. But most of the media wouldn't acknowledge that it was emaciated. When you see the rib cage sticking, like you can count the ribs. One more try. Give me one more try, please. Don't give up on me yet. I'm almost there. Oh, that was one I just looked at. Okay, gotta be, there's only two more there I can look into. Can't be the top one, it has to be this one. And which is the way, this was only a month and a half apart or something, those killer whales. They're continents apart, but they're the apex predator severely emaciated. There it is. This is the Belgium. James had done an incredible song about it. Let me see if I can find it. I really liked the song a lot. It was Nuclear Belgium, so I should be able to find it. Just search for it. Nuclear Belgium. I'm going to play that because I got a really dry throat. Nuclear Belgium. I'll be right back. I'm not going to play the whole song. Maybe I will. I can't remember. It's only a short song. Let's play that song. It's an amazing song. Nuclear Belgium. And there was more stories going on, but it was appropriate because of the killer whale.
100 hands, reverse the law. Phase one set, now put on pause. They claimed the grid could not endure and fed the myth of power pure. The fuel was buried, not the plan. It only waits for votes to stand. From all they stacked the vessels deep. T-hands ran long though did not sleep. No chant was sung, no grave was raised. Just softer lights in western bays. A farmer passed through fields unclaimed. No one asked what wasn't named. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots cast, the elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast. They wrote it down in 23, then turned the page before the plea. The cause they pitched became a door, a lease renewed without a floor. The mask was spun in policy, but no one asked the river's fee. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots cast, the elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast. Now tell the child in Malta today what steams beneath the concrete base. Dessel's drums into me lie, and NATO carries what we weigh. The wind from Flanders bends its back. The scaffold stands, but none look back. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots casted, elites decree. Nuclear Belgium.
Belgium. Because he's after producing so much, you don't want these songs to go down the black hole, so to speak, right? So it's good to bring them back. Orca washes up on a Belgian beach. Now, he wrote the song about the promotion of nuclear in Belgium. Belgium all of a sudden became pro-nuclear, and they're going to build these small modular reactors. Well, small modular reactors don't exist. You don't even have an application into the regulatory agencies for the licenses. At the same time, there was this story and a turtle. And this was stunning. This is a killer whale that can eat 340 species, does eat 340 species that we know about. And it's hideous. It's not supposed to be in Belgium. It's the only one they've ever seen. It's way out of its territory. And the emaciation is just peanut head, shoulder blades sticking out, concaved body. Like, I've never seen anything like it for an apex predator. And at the same time, it was the same thing for Christchurch. But I mean, that peanut head, that's surreal to see, right? And then at the same time, in Christchurch, New Zealand, 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, severe emaciation, you actually see the rib cage. You actually see the rib cage sticking out. And they acknowledged it died of starvation. But half the media, the original first 3-4 stories that came out, did not said, actually some of them even said it was a healthy whale. It simply wasn't. And when you finally had organizations, boots on the ground, they acknowledged, it should be right there. I don't see it. The audio should have been in that pile. It must have been another one, I guess. And so again, we're seeing this emaciation of all species. And you can no longer pretend this is not happening. Well, we can't anyway. Right? It's an educational program, so there's no sense. There's nothing to be gained by playing, or I'm going to bring in some more pictures here. Right, there was a turtle, I got that. It should be right, it should be in that pile. Let's put this in. We're going to cover this again next week, mind you. I might even cover it tomorrow night, who knows. So there was also a turtle showed up in Belgium at the same time as Belgium went pro-nuclear. And so within days of them coming out and James writing and posting that song, I found the turtles showing up on their beach, was dead. And then the orca, the autopsy couldn't find the cause of death. Look at the rib cage. Look, it's deflated. The autopsy couldn't find the cause of death. No, and 2 days before that, 3 days before that, they were announced they're going to build small modular reactors in this impoverished country that doesn't need, because geothermal can do better any day of the week, right? And they had that turtle that had never been on their beach before show up dead, and the most emaciated whale I've ever seen, a killer whale I've ever seen, and it's deflated on top of that. No muscle, fat, no blubber, no nothing. It went until it died. So you can see shoulder blades sticking right up high, and defined rib cage. I've never ever even heard tell of something like that. That was an anonymous sign for Belgium, right? That's a surreal picture. That wouldn't exist pre-Fukushima. None of this stuff I'm showing you would exist pre-Fukushima. That's the same whale. That's crazy stuff, see? It's actually deflated. I've never seen that before. I've never seen nothing like it. And we've been at this a long time, my goodness. But the tail is a dead giveaway. So if you only get, a lot of times you only get the shot of the tail, right? But when you see all the bones, you know there's emaciation. We've never seen nothing like this. That's deflated. And it was the same thing when we finally got the pictures, decent pictures from a story of 4 weeks later in New Zealand, a continent away, with severe emaciation again. Yeah, if they're not emaciated, that means there's something wrong. That's me trying to be funny. Oh, James got a song out. Brilliant. The Strandings of the Furt. Is that Scotland he's talking about? I wonder. We'll see. He's got a link under that. What time? How are we doing on time anyway? We're doing okay. All right, so the reason... Let me put that picture over there too. That's crazy pictures, man. That's like holy... When I seen that last month, I've never seen nothing like that. And we see, like, we think we've seen the worst of the worst, but... Here's an interesting thing about Japan. The nuclear industry, because Japan couldn't do this without the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry and the universities worldwide and the medias have worked diligently to destroy everybody's future so that the nuclear industry can survive for just a bit longer. They've scuttled all the renewable energy they could. They had companies, and their job was to take huge grants from the government for solar and wind and turn it into a mockery, and then the media's job was to take that and humiliate the renewable environmentalists, right? The idea was to break their spirit and break their will, right? And it worked for the most part. And they're still at it heavily. The social engineering is just, it's prolific everywhere. So on March the 15th, 2011, day 4, they had 4 melted reactors in a row and 8 fuel pools unaccounted for. It's 36 reactor cores. And so every academic on the planet, when they seen that picture, and they did, worldwide, that was it. That was plastered everywhere, that picture. There wasn't a nuclear scientist on the planet that didn't know the fuel pools were gone, that didn't know the reactor cores were gone. And even today, they still refuse to tell us. But my throat is so dry, I'm going to have to give it up, I guess. And that's okay. Because we're going to pick up tomorrow night. Anyway. And we got all next week to get through this stuff. We got an enormous amount. It could take us longer. But it's very important stuff. And because I'm censored so heavily, we need to get this front and center again, this conversation. We need to have a conversation. And then what we're going to do is we bring out the documentation and start invoking a conversation, right? And so the poll tonight is Walmart cesium-137 shrimp radioactive because of Fukushima. Yeah, well, you got 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment. But Fukushima was an absurd event. The inventories we're talking about are just horrific. It's unprecedented in scope and scale. And the health effects are for everything. And as I'm showing you, and if you haven't seen the #1 show, you need to watch that when you get a chance. And that'll give you incredible more context of why we have certain assertions, right? You need to learn that. It's not very hard. We provide you all the documentation. And thank you, everybody. Hi, everybody. We got 27 votes. So we're just going to close it with a song. James happened to got a new song up. I think it's a song, James. He does different kind of stuff too, right? It's gonna take him a while before he can do something as magic as that video. All of them are magic, don't get me wrong. That's a special one. That radioactive shrimp, you need to watch that a few times, folks. You really do. That is some crazy artwork. And we're looking forward to what he's got here. The stranding of the fruit. There's a story underneath. I'm going to stop the video. Wow, listen to that. I'm going to check out that story first. Let's check out that story. Scientists investigate a surge in whale dolphin stranding from the degenerate BBC. And you got the rope around it. That's a sperm whale. There's been an increase now, and so disgusting to put that picture there when the majority of the whales are diving for starvation. They put a picture there with rope, right? Well, BBC is the British government. That's a pretty disturbing picture. When the reality of it is, I showed you the emaciated whales. The majority of the animals are not dying from ropes, they're dying from starvation. There's been an exponential increase in marine mammal strandings. Estimate was around 50,000 post-Fukushima. Pre-Fukushima, in the 14 years pre-Fukushima, was maybe 12. The number of whales, dolphins, porpoise getting into difficulty have risen from 100 a year to more than 300 over a 30-year period. There was literally none pre-Fukushima. It's a completely dishonest story. Researchers at the university, these are the worst people you can ever meet. And we proved it here endless times. You're going to blame plastic, noise pollution, entanglement, chemicals, anything but the truth. More than 5,140 stranded marine mammals recorded from 1992 to almost all of them are post-Fukushima. And the strandings in 1992 was after decades of nuclear fallout from weapons testing. They're pretty disgusting people. In fact, that's why James produced a song, is because he's like me, where it'll piss you off, and you got to come out and just. In his case, he has the luxury of like a mockery meant. He can come out and mock him in a video, and convey absurd amount to the average person, right? And then the visuals. I'm looking forward to it. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow night for the last show of the week is Thursday. Don't miss that one. It might be early because these are typically long shows. They're hard on me. Have a great night.
Come gather, good people, I'll sing ye a song of whales on the shoreline, laid heavy and wrong. The tide bore its burden, a sorrowful sight. The strandings o' the firth in the dead o' the night. They came in their hundreds, the dolphin, the whale, driven to shallows with a sorrowful tale. The learned men muttered on nets and no noise, but the seas bear a tally that none can disguise. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. They'll talk all the weather, they'll talk all the storm. They'll scribble their numbers to keep with the norm. But the count only rises, the carcasses show a reckoning carry where hands on the table, let everyone ken the strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. And if ye should wander the shoreline at dawn, where once the great singers and dancers had gone, remember the silence, remember the sound, the strandings o' the firth where the warning is found. So order a half and a half at the bar, from Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken the strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. So order a half and a half at the bar, from Fukushima's waters the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken the strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men.
Now, hang on there. That was crazy. My goodness. That was madness. So, bear with me. That was really good, man. So now I got to withdraw my comment that I just made. When I said it's going to be hard to beat the stranding of the radioactive shrimp song for a while. That was crazy, man. Okay, so I want to play another song of James's, and I might even play that one again, because I really enjoyed that. That like totally caught me off guard. So I'm going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to play that other song, because I think those two songs are very, very special. And the shrimp song, it's unbelievably special. But this one and the one we just listened to, I'm going to play it again after this, because why not? I'm going to listen to it again anyway. Might as well do it here with you guys. So I'm going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism, because that's the best nuclear anthem I've ever heard in my life, by far. And then we'll come back and play that other song.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah,
mean, that is amazing, right? So let's play that other one. And I think we're going to end it with the radioactive shrimp because I want to hear that one again. So we're going to play that newest one he's got there, The Stranding of the Flirt. That's absolutely wild. Here we go.
Come gather, good people, I'll sing ye a song of whales on the shoreline, laid heavy and wrong. The tide bore its burden, a sorrowful sight. The strandings o' the firth in the dead o' the night. They came in their hundreds, the dolphin, the whale, driven to shallows with a sorrowful tale. The learned men muttered on nets and no noise, but the seas bear a tally that none can disguise. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. They'll talk o' the weather, they'll talk o' the storm. They'll scribble their numbers to keep with the norm. But the count only rises, the carcasses show a reckoning carry wherever tides go. From Rasse to Moray, the tidings run grim. The porpoise and mink now drift at the brim. Yet silence in council halls buries the cost, for silver and power would sooner them lost. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. And if ye should wander the shoreline at dawn, where once the great singers and dancers had gone, remember the silence, remember the sound, the strandings o' the firth where the warning is found. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the firth mark the folly o' men.
Yeah, and that was just amazing. I love it. That was insane. And we're going to end it on this one. You have a great night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you on the next show. And what a friggin' song that was. My goodness.
Oh yeah! Listen close to the tide tonight. The ocean serves what the core ignite. Shrimp, shrimp, camarón atómico. Shrimp, shrimp, camarón radioactive. Dessert in the fish, cold in the meat, cesium 137B. You can't taste the chain reaction, isotopes will not disguise. Every bite is a confession from the vessel